Australia was established, yeah, sure, it was a pretty brutal settlement. My forefather and foremothers were on the first and second fleets. It was a pretty brutal place, but there was no slavery in Australia.
For almost a century, Indigenous Australians and those from nearby Pacific, Torres Strait and South Sea Islands were forced to work under inhumane conditions for little to no compensation. Today we would refer to this practice as slavery, but historically we used another term, blackbirding.
Geez, if my mum was alive, I'd like to see Morrison convince my mum she wasn't treated like a slave at Woorabinda, where she's taken away to work in servitude as a domestic, along with my aunties on nearby cattle properties.
My comments were not intended to give offence, and if they did, I deeply regret that and apologise for that. But this is not about getting into the history wars. I was simply trying to make the point that Australia, yes, we have had issues in our history. We have acknowledged them. I have acknowledged them. And we need to address them.
When the American Civil War cut off the world's cotton supply, Australia stepped in, using Indigenous workers to establish cotton plantations in southern Queensland. Between 1863 and 1904, some 62,500 South Sea Islanders were blackbirded from South Sea and Pacific Islands to work as pearl divers and workers on sugar and cotton plantations. These men were sent to work under harsh conditions, where white landowners were given powers to restrict their movement, decide who they would marry, where they would live, and what would happen to their children.
But then see, they play the game and they say, well, yeah, that wasn't actually slavery. That was, you know, we weren't selling humans. Well, as a matter of fact, they were.
In 1897, the Queensland Aboriginal Protection Act was put in place, implementing employment and wage control on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
So the legislation at the time required permits to be entered into with the station workers and the local protector. It required that the wages of that worker be paid direct to the protector and not to the worker.
The government-appointed protector, usually a police officer, was also charged with negotiating the contract of employment and wage on behalf of the worker, who received a small portion of these wages as pocket money, or often nothing at all.